Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. It's Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, and I'm Dave Sobel. Today on the show, we talk lots of security as the head of Lockbit is identified, CISA positions itself, and the State Department advances their strategy. Plus, the RSA conference is full of announcements and some M&A from around the MSP channel. We'll discuss my interview with Ramzi Sehun from Evergreen Services Group, and a preview of my interview with Rob Fagan and how you can partner with Microsoft. Plus, as always, your questions and comments. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And do you want your logo to appear here? Vendors, you can do so with our Vendor Patreon program. It's a simple monthly subscription, and visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to sign up. I can't do this show without support, and thanks again to Sales Builder for theirs. Now, we'll be taking questions and comments throughout the show, so make sure to put them in chat. There's a dedicated question section later in the show with those listener-submitted questions, but we'll put your chat up on screen anytime to make sure to get those comments out for everybody. But now, our top story. US and UK authorities have identified and named Dmitry Korshev as the alleged leader of the Lockbit ransomware gang. A 26-count indictment has been unsealed in the United States, and a reward of up to $10 million is being offered for information leading to his arrest and or conviction. The Lockbit gang, known for providing ransomware as a service, has caused billions of dollars in losses and disrupted critical infrastructure. While the joint operation earlier this year reduced the gang's global threat, experts warn that ransomware gangs are resilient and dispersed, making it difficult to eliminate their activities completely. Koroshev faces multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion, with a maximum penalty of 185 years in prison. And from Axios, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is the US's youngest agency, has become a key intermediary between private companies and the US government in defeating and defending against major cyber attacks. Director Jen Easterly now sees the agency as the goalie of the federal government cyber team. CISA is set to unveil high-profile projects, including a public awareness campaign and a pledge from tech companies to implement secure by design standards. The agency has also been proactively detecting malicious activity on critical infrastructure companies' systems, focusing on Chinese nation-state activity. The U.S. State Department released a new international cyber strategy at the RSA conference this week, outlining its approach to cyber diplomacy, including sanctioning ransomware gangs, establishing data governance policies, and building international partnerships in cybersecurity. The strategy also identifies China as a significant cyber threat. The strategy's release underscores the importance of the private sector's role in implementing the strategy, with the Biden administration backing investment principles aligned with the strategy and promoting secure by design principles globally. So, why do we care? One of the recurring themes of the business of tech has been the need for more security oversight. Well, we're getting it. Two big pushes. First, we see law enforcement making strides in identifying and bringing to justice criminals involved in cybersecurity. Second, the agencies tasked with implementing security policies are making significant strides. So your takeaways. You must involve law enforcement in your breaches if you want continued success here. One of the things we've seen over and over again is those companies that do involve law enforcement are getting better results. Let's point to that large Kaseya hack on July 4th that led now just recently to full convictions. What was the difference? Key law enforcement involvement early in the process. Second, you do need to cultivate your relationship with CISA. That might be as simple as building into your procedures how to connect to their resources. But there's a lot more you can do too. They've got local branch offices. There are officers willing and waiting to talk to you, and a large number of resources, not just for incident response, but for use in your business ongoing. Make sure you are leveraging all of those resources and be proactive about both of these engagements, because it is looking like that's making the difference. So what do you think? Are you encouraged by these moves? Do you see cybersecurity changing because of the government involvement? I do want to hear those questions and comments. Put it in the chat if you're watching live. We've got a couple more stories to talk about. First up, Fortinet has announced new updates to its generative AI portfolio, including the industry's first Gen AI Internet of Things security assistant. These updates enhance security and network operations, providing capabilities such as generative AI-assisted scripting for network configuration, a conversational AI interface for IoT vulnerability detection, and dictation capabilities for threat hunting and analysis. Fortinet's generative AI assistant, Forte AI, supports natural language processing in multiple languages, bridging the cybersecurity skills gap and improving operational efficiency. The company also prioritizes generative AI security and data privacy, ensuring secure AI processes and protecting customer data. Forte AI is integrated with various Fortinet products, enabling context-aware security and network operations assistance. Ignite is adding a Microsoft Purview compatible document classification label feature that integrates with security partners' products. This allows users to have their content scanned and labeled for access security levels, preventing improper access. The integration works with various DLP, DRM, and EDR products, using AI to classify content and apply metadata. Ignite is exhibiting these features at the RSA conference. 1Password Enterprise Password Manager Partner Edition is now available in beta for managed services providers. This comprehensive solution offers centralized client management, streamlined billing, and integration with existing client services and apps. MSPs can enhance their security measures, protect clients' data, and become trusted advisors with the highest level of security provided by 1Password. Register as an MSP to stay updated on the 1Password Partner Program and start transacting as a reseller. So, why do we care? Now, I'm very security-centric today, probably due to the RSA conference this week. And so we're looking at these products with a critical eye of understanding what's useful. This is the time to showcase those new technologies. I'm going to start with Fortinet. I'm certainly very interested in the idea of a product that can provide insights and assistance to you while using it. Being able to ask it questions, get information back, and provide additional language support is an interesting idea. The idea of being able to communicate right with those products makes a lot of sense. And thematically, it hits a lot of the things we've talked about from an AI perspective, that there will be a so-called co-pilot for every situation. That makes a lot of sense to me. Ignite, of course, looking at it from the perspective of automatically classifying documents. Again, an idea that makes sense. We've got tons of data out there, and for the most part, most organizations have done a very bad job of doing data management. Anything that we can do to make that a little bit better makes sense to me. Finally, I find it interesting to note that 1Password has moved into this now password manager at a multi-tenant level. It's intriguing to see the security platforms move this way. Now, I want to balance these advanced products with the idea of doing the basics well. If you're not doing the basics well, this is beyond the need that you have right now. Remember, the basic idea of two-factor authentication, good audit logs, great backups, and your customer education are going to be the key to succeeding in a security landscape. But you got to start there, and you got to start somewhere. Reminder, we are taking those questions, and I'm watching the chat. If you've got an idea, throw it in the chat, and we will comment or talk about it any point during the show. Now, this past weekend, I interviewed Ramsey Sehun, who's one of the co-founders of Evergreen Services Group. Here's a snippet of that interview. Actually, get a little bit of your insight into kind of what's the perfect sense of the way a deal would be structured for looking from Evergreen's perspective of how that value and investment will return back from a cash and from an ownership perspective. Kind of give me a little bit of like the perfect version so that we don't have to describe a specific deal, but like kind of the structure in your head of the way you want that to work.
Yeah. I think the perfect evergreen deal is one, and the first company we acquired, I will get specific. The first company we acquired, Wolf Consulting, has been just an amazing acquisition, and I think been kind of been the benchmark against which we measure all of our other acquisitions. So it was a really solid, operationally mature MSP, doing a lot of the right things. Lloyd Wolf was the founder, really strong operator. He wanted to sell and transition out of the business, but he cared a lot about the business operating independently and about it having a long-term home. We put Elliot Hyman, who actually is now the CEO oversees all of our MSPs, all 70 of them globally. But we put him in as the director of business development at Wolf Consulting for a year. And then he succeeded Lloyd as CEO, and Lloyd transitioned out. Wolf is more than tripled in size since we all organically, like no acquisitions, is tripled in size since we acquired it. And now that Elliot has hired his successor, guy named JB Lamb that runs Wolf Consulting today, as Elliot's elevated to oversee all of our MSPs. So that was that one. It felt like we just got everything right, like as far as the quality of the business, the quality of the person that we partnered with in Lloyd, placing a leader, the succession plan going really well, that leader having bigger career opportunities within Evergreen as they grow in their career. So I think that's kind of like when it all goes right.
So we have to ask, why do we care? One of the reasons I've been talking to some of these M&A and private equity investors is the idea of understanding their thesis. It's really easy for us as analysts to broadly talk about private equity as a single thing. It is, except it also isn't. You've got to make sure that you understand what the different players are trying to get out of their investment. Some of the players, like Evergreen, are looking at a thesis that they explain very clearly, that they're looking to create cash machines of these organizations that spit off cash on an ongoing basis. Other theses are the idea of taking an asset, changing it around, rebundling it, increasing revenue, and driving down lower costs, and then selling it within a specific time frame, say 3 to 5 years. I think it's critically important that we do a better job of asking the investor side of the equation what their thesis is. Most of the time when I look at M&A coverage, it's always about the idea of, well, what are they looking for, and how do you get your business ready? That's only half the story. Your business is ready, but then who is it sold to, and what happens to it after, particularly if your payout will be happening over the lifetime of that investment. And I think it's important that we spend more time understanding that, because not all transactions are equal. I want to give Ramsey some credit. He got specific in the interview and went into some of the specific ways that they put deals together. And I would encourage you to go ahead and dig into that video if you want to learn more. And note that I've interviewed several other investors as well, and you can spend some time hearing their different theses. And I'd probably you also at Brendan Ballou, who's one of the who wrote a book specifically on private equity, who then also will give you the counter arguments on when certain theses don't make sense. Now, we do continue to take questions, or you can submit them anytime in the chat window, or submit it for next week if you're watching the recording, sending it to question@mspradio.com. Now, we've got a couple more stories before we dive into questions. First up, managed IT services provider Dataprise, backed by Trinity Hunt Partners, has acquired Hook Systems, an IT service provider, to expand its presence on the East Coast and offer cybersecurity services. This marks Dataprise's third acquisition, following Cohere Cybersecurity and PEI. Adding Hook Systems strengthens Dataprise's regional footprint and enhances its technology services with a personalized touch. Intiva's acquisition of the Purple Guys is considered a significant move in the MSP industry, making Intiva one of the largest MSPs in the country. The acquisition expands Intiva's presence in multiple regions and indicates a ramp up in M&A activity in the IT services industry. The deal highlights the trend of rapid consolidation among MSPs and the robust capital conditions for M&A. The cultural fit and complementary geographic markets were critical factors in the acquisition, and the combined company aims to continue delivering excellent services and offer opportunities for growth. Finally, Accenture has agreed to acquire Parsonate, a data consultancy specializing in data products and modern data foundation services. The acquisition will strengthen Accenture's data and AI capabilities in Europe, particularly in the retail, industrial, consumer goods, and life sciences industries. The move aligns with the increasing focus on data and AI, as research shows that 75% of C-level leaders plan to increase spending in those areas. The acquisition is part of Accenture's strategy to enhance its data and AI offerings and follows previous acquisitions in the same field. The terms of the transaction were not disclosed. Now, why do we care? Now, I'll make my always joke that when terms of the transaction were not disclosed, you should replace it with a case of beer, because you should always lower the valuation in your head rather than inflate it. One of the reasons that that information is kept private is to make you think it's more. Actually take the intention and flip it on its head and assume it was for very little. That will actually help you in your analysis. Now, I want to tell a tale of M&A strategy. The reasons for M&A vary greatly. What we're seeing here is two major examples of that and why I wanted to focus on it. The first is that geography and capability expansion are key ones. See what happened here with both the Purple Guys and with Dataprise's expansions. They were focused on the area of moving into new geographies. That's a key detail. That if their expansion is about that, that's one of the reasons to do it. And you got to make sure that you understand, again, the thesis of why acquisitions happen. Capability expansion is the other one. In many cases here, this was about adding cybersecurity into their offerings. But I want to highlight Accenture for a moment because they're looking at data and AI capabilities. One of the reasons I like looking at the really large consulting organizations is because they are planning much more aggressively for the future, and they see opportunity in AI and data management. Have you heard a theme here before? You should. That's something that we've been talking about multiple times on the show. And that's why I find these particularly ones interesting, is that we can talk about what the differences is. Those expansions geography-wise are very, very tactical. But investments in new areas of offering are much more strategic. And that's ultimately why we care, to learn lessons from those strategic investments and decide if they matter to our own organizations. Now, make sure to put any questions in chat. We do take them, and we will be answering any questions in chat and live. Remember, if you bring your questions live, you'll get a live response. I really do enjoy taking the questions. Of course, if you don't have an opportunity to join us live, submit them ahead of time. Q&A gives you a chance to get involved with the show. So let's take our first submitted question.
Thinking about all the various breaches we track, how do vendors' responses to security incidents impact long-term user trust and vendor selection strategies?
This is a fun question to talk about, to think about the way vendor responses matter. Let's focus on the question in long-term response. I think short-term, you always want to think about it from a crisis management perspective, and that's over-communicate and over-correct. But long-term, how much does this really linger? I ask the question because in most cases, from a financial perspective, most of the large organizations, particularly large vendors, are not seeing long-term consequences of vendor breaches. And they are not ultimately being pushed away by users. I think this is important to note. It isn't necessarily a long-term piece. So I wouldn't worry too much about long-term consequences of data breaches. I would think much more about the way they're going to partner with you during the breach itself. Look at if they've been breached, and many have, of the way that they've responded and the way that they've put together their incident response plans. It's an easy example for me to cite. Kaseya, who is not very well loved oftentimes in the IT channel, is an example of doing a good job on communication. They actually were very proactive with their partners where they could be, and they were very involved with law enforcement. And ultimately, that resulted in a conviction and sentencing for the lead hacker. So what I would counsel you to do is spend less time on the long-term implications and focus a little bit more on understanding the way their short-term incident response plan is, because you want to make sure that you've got a partner you can work with during the breach. So we've got another submitted question. Let's pull it up.
How can salespeople in the MSP industry improve client acquisition and conversion, especially when traditional methods like networking events seem less effective?
So it's interesting that the question comes to focus on the idea of network events being a little less effective. Person-to-person networking is a grind. You have to do it on a 1 or 2 business card basis at a time. So what I would tell most MSPs and IT services companies in this space is I don't think there's nearly enough investment in true digital acquisition. I would say, are you looking at all of the various ways that you can build community online around your organization? That's going to include things like digital ads, particularly very targeted ones that are run over time, with a digital acquisition strategy to drive them to your website, where ideally you've done work to make sure that your website is ready for acquisition. And if you think just having a contact us form is enough, I'm going to tell you that there are 2 videos on my website or my YouTube channel that you want to dig into, where I talk about e-commerce as an idea for your strategy for your website. You want to do more. Can they book an appointment with you? Can they engage your services? Can they call up and buy assessment services? These are all optional and ideal places for you to start with a digital acquisition strategy. You want to think that through. And can they sign up for resources? Can they get access to webinars, networking events that you do online, or your newsletter? Can you get access to those resources directly? And are you a destination for them to go in an online manner? Think about that full digital funnel. Most MSPs do not spend very much time thinking about that digital acquisition funnel, and I would encourage you to spend some time there, particularly if you're finding that networking events are continuing to be more and more difficult. I love getting these questions ahead of time, and so if you have one, submit it in at question@mspradio.com. I think we've cleared the question board for today, so let's go ahead and move on and talk about what's upcoming. This weekend, I'm going to be offering out you the opportunity to hear my interview with Rob Fagan on partnering with Microsoft. Here's a preview of that interview. Before we dive in, because you're a super deep Microsoft partnership expert, but in order to give me some context of that, tell me kind of how you got to be an expert in all things Microsoft and the partnership relationship.
Yeah, that journey goes back a few years now. It's about 15, coming up on 20 years now, I think, that I've worked with Microsoft in the partner community. So both as a value-added reseller, I was an individual contributor there, and then went through that journey in a number of different companies. And finally, back in 2015, I started my own Microsoft partner, where we were referred to as a systems integrator. So we were deploying Microsoft software for businesses of all sizes, whether they were sort of small companies of 50 or 100 people, or they were larger companies of thousands up to tens of thousands of employees. We were deploying Microsoft software. So that's really where the journey started. And I've always had a passion for working with Microsoft. I think the technology has evolved and has really become, very broad in terms of what Microsoft brings to the table. So I've really enjoyed this journey.
Well, in particular, when I think of the big tech players, Microsoft really is the only one that is very bold about saying we are partner friendly and want to engage. I don't think about Alphabet and Google, despite them having a partner program. I don't think of them in the same way. Amazon, same way, has a program. I don't think of them in the same way, but Microsoft has that reputation. Now, when you're starting to talk with somebody about okay, hey, I want to be better at working with Microsoft, where do you start that conversation to understand the best ways to navigate a really large organization?
Yeah, that is, it's the $1 million question, because as I alluded to, Microsoft does so many different things, and they have so many different avenues that you can add value to a customer.
And that's ultimately the interesting place, is how can you add value through that partnership? That interview will be dropping this weekend. I look forward to talking about it with you more next week, as we'll dive into why do we care after you've had the chance to listen to it. But reminder for listeners, my Patreon supporters already have this video, and you can get all my interview content as a supporter early. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to sign up for that. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. Vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on the live show. It's a simple monthly subscription. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to learn more. And listeners, you can support the show. Like, share, and follow on your favorite platforms. It really does make a huge difference, and I appreciate your support in that way. But you can also support directly on Patreon with our Give What You Want model. You set what the content is worth as part of your subscription. If you have a question or are listening to the recording, send it in at question@mspradio.com. Next week, this live show is on Wednesday, so catch us live Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining me for the Business of Tech Lounge, and I will see you next time.